am building some simple countertops for my laundry room. Earlier this year, I renovated a shop building, and in that process, I demoed a room that yielded a ton of material that I de-nailed and threw into a pile. Know that you can definitely do this project with any wood of your choosing, but I'm going with 2x4's and 2x6's since I have an abundance of them. You can pick at the beginning of this project whether you want your countertop looking uniformed and flawless, and if that's the case, then you might buy new 2x4's and pick up boards that are clear of knots. Or if you're like me and want a tad more rustic with character, then I chose boards with more nail holes and a variety of lengths. The first thing I did was move my mobile cart to the side of my miter saw stand. This is so that I can flip out the wing and pull my material directly from the cart to the saw and cut the ends. Whenever you're joining boards together, you need all of the edges and ends to be at 90 and straight. The miter takes care of the ends. It's also at this step that you can cut your boards to length. And I definitely recommend taking the measurement your top needs to be, but then leaving yourself an extra inch or two. You're going to cut it down perfectly later on. Next is to knock off the rounded edges of the material. If you have a jointer, then you can use it to get that one edge flat and one face flat. Next, I move the pretty large pile to my table saw. Oh, hello Totem. Here, I make sure to place the jointed edge up against the table saw fence to get the second edge parallel to it. Then I use the thickness planer to get the second face flat. Now, if you don't have a jointer, then one, I'm gonna leave you a link to 2 videos where I show you how to use a table saw or a router as a jointer. But then 2, you can keep this project super simple and let it come out a little imperfect. If you only have a table saw, you can use it to cut off each rounded edge and then leave the face alone. This method will require more sanding and you might end up with a few small gaps, but you can still build yourself some countertops. Okay, after getting all of the material square and straight, I next laid out my boards to get the depth my countertop and shelf needed, then started arranging them. The first thing I do is line up one side of the boards to be in line with one another. Now, my finished countertop will land about here, but it's always best to make a bigger than needed slab, then cut it down in the end. Next, I look at the tree ring direction and try to stagger them. See how these rings curve down? This one is pretty center, but this one curves up, then this one down. What you want to avoid is all the rings facing the same direction, as that's going to promote the entire slab to cut in that direction, whereas alternating them will oppose the forces. The next thing I look at is where all the seams line up. See how most all land right in this zone? I personally want a little more variety. So what you can do is take a smaller board and place them at the front. You just flip-flop the 2 boards, and that will push the seam away from the others. So after I did that with a few other rows, now my seams were spaced out all across the slab. Okay, the last thing I looked at before sticking things together was the butt joints. You can see this joint does not close nicely. And if it doesn't close nicely now, it definitely won't once you put glue on it. So take the time to recut both ends at the miter saw. Okay, now let's do the thing that probably causes the most stress in woodworking. I'm talking about glue ups. It's common when you first start building a big slab like this to try and glue up all of the boards at one time. However, you learn really quick that it's way better to do multiple small glue ups so that they come out right rather than rush it and mess it up or stress yourself out. When you're gluing things together with yellow wood glue, my go-to is DAP's Weldwood, you typically have about 3 to 4 minutes of working time, which is not a lot. So have as many things ready to go as you can, such as clamps, brushes, mallets, and biscuits in my case, which we can talk about next. You can definitely cut all of your boards and just glue, then clamp them together. But where biscuits help is aligning the tops. Once you apply glue to 2 surfaces, they're gonna slip and slide, and getting a perfectly flush top is almost impossible. By cutting in biscuit slots, this tool references the top of each board to cut in the slot on each edge so that when you insert a biscuit, it's gonna automatically align each board and not allow it to slip around while applying pressure. Alternatives that achieve the same thing are dowels or a domino. But remember, you can definitely glue up boards if you don't have any of them. It will just require more flattening in the next step. Oh, well, it would be the next step, but I added in another step. See, after milling all of my boards, my 2x4s turned out to be only 1 1/4 inches, which is good, but I personally wanted the look to be closer to 2 inches. To achieve this, I cut a nose that will be the thickness I want and simply attached it to the very front. So know this is a trick you can use to make your glue up look thicker. Okay, now let's start flattening this thing. Like everything in building, there are several ways to do everything. The countertop is too wide for my thickness planer, so I did this by hand with my 4-inch belt sander. You want to choose the widest belt sander you have so that it's easier to keep it flat and not create divots. I also like to turn my sander to a 45 on the first pass to hog away material faster. Then sand out the scuffs this creates in the lower grits. At this point, things are really close to being done, so hang in there. Now, I cut my top and shelf to their exact needed length. I chose to use the sliding portion of my table saw to make this cut, but a track saw or a circular saw with a fence would definitely work as well. Next, I wanted to set the countertop in place and see how it was going to look up against my wall. Know that no wall is ever going to be perfectly straight, so if you put something straight up against it, you're going to have gaps. You can cover up the gap with a backsplash board, or you can trace the exact shape of your wall onto the countertop, and this is called scribing. I did this with a carpenter's pencil, but you can use just about anything as long as you keep it consistent. Once I had my line established, you can either sand away up to it or cut it away. Okay, and that is it for the technical building part, but before installing it, I went ahead and put on a coat of finish. I'm using Total Boat's Gleam 2.0, which is a spar varnish that is super easy to use. It does have a high gloss, which I was going for here, and one of my favorite features, it is fast drying. I like to use their wood sealer varnish primer beforehand, which does a really great job at filling in the grain to create an even smoother finish. To install the countertop, I simply crawled inside and screwed it through some wooden scrap strips I screwed into place. Then for the shelf up here, I screwed in a cleat to the corner where I knew there was going to be framing, and then cut in a receiving notch to the shelf so that it could sit right on top, but then also give me something to screw down into. Then the left terminates right into the cabinet so that I could go to the inside and throw a few screws into the end grain. All right, and I'm gonna call this another project done. I'm gonna leave you links to videos showing you how to build cabinets and also me installing these in case you have a similar project on your hands. I really hope that this video is giving you some good tips or inspiration if you have building cheap countertops on your to-do list. I'll see you on whatever I'm building next. Yeah, just one. Yay! You happy, Bubba? No, you don't even care.